Greetings and salutations. Today we will be covering the case of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. The Dyatlov Pass Incident is one of Russia's most long-standing mysteries. To this day, there are disputes and arguments about what led up to the deaths of the hikers. On January 27, 1959, a 10-person hiking team consisting mostly of students from Ural Polytechnic Institute, who were led by Igor Dyatlov, on a 14-day expedition to the Ural Mountains. Igor Dyatlov was a 23-year-old radio engineer and student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Igor would also be the individual who would assemble the group. However, just prior to the trip, one of the individuals who was part of the group had to turn back due to health complications and inclement weather. It must be noted that the students were vastly experienced hikers, along with being very seasoned skiers. However, the route they were taking was classed as a Category 3, the most dangerous type of route. The trip began rather uneventfully. However, once February 2nd came about, the remaining part of the group, which continued the hike, would end up being dead, leading to the mystery of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. At the beginning of their journey, the group would arrive at Ivdel. This was a town at the center of the northern province of the Sverdlovsk Oblast. They would reach this destination during the morning hours of January 25th, 1959. From there, they would board a train to Vizhai, which was a relatively small town. It was one of, if not the northmost settlement in the area. The group purchased and ate loaves of bread to keep up their energy levels for the following day. This was how they would spend their time in Vizhai. They left Vizhai on January 27th, and then they began their trek towards Gora Orten. Then, on January 28th, one of the members, Yuri Yudin, who had severe medical conditions, including a congenital heart defect, turned back due to knee and joint pain that made him unable to continue the hike. However, the remaining hikers would continue their trek unabated. The diaries, cameras, logbooks, along with other information left by the group at the campsite, made it possible to track the group's route day by day until the preceding incident. On January 31st, the group arrived at the edge of the highland area and began to prepare for the climbing section of the trek. They would set up a cache of food, supplies, and equipment that would be needed on their trip back in a wooded valley just prior to the climbing section of the trek. It wouldn't be until the next day that the hikers would move through the pass. It appeared as they intended to get through the pass and make camp for the night on the opposite side. Unfortunately for them, the worsening weather conditions, including but not limited to snowing, caused decreased visibility. Said decrease in visibility caused them to lose their location, leading them to deviate far west of where they intended to be. This caused them to wind up at the top or near the top of Kholech Seki. However, they would soon come to realize their mistake, which led the group to setting up camp on the slope of the mountain, rather than moving about what would be just shy of a mile to a forested area. Said forested area would have granted them some limited amount of shelter from weather and probably increased the chances of survival they would have had. Later, Yudin would speculate Dyatlov probably did not want to lose the altitude they had gained, or he had decided to practice camping on the mountain slope. This would be the reasoning he would apply to his former companions' decisions. Prior to the start of their journey, Dyatlov had agreed that he would send a telegram to their sports club as soon as the group arrived in Vizhai. It was expected that this would happen no later than February the 12th. However, Dyatlov had told Yudin before he had departed from the group that he expected it to take a little longer. When the 12th passed with no message, there was little to no immediate reaction. This was in part due to delays being common with such types of expeditions. However, on the 20th of February, the travelers' relatives would go on to demand that a rescue operation be mounted. This led to the head of the institute and later teachers to mount rescue groups consisting of volunteers, students, and teachers. Eventually, the army and some police forces would become involved. They would contribute planes, helicopters, and more manpower. It wouldn't be until February 26th that the searchers would find the group's abandoned tent, which was severely damaged. The campsite really baffled the search party. Mikhail Shidivin was the student who found the tent, and he went on to say, "The tent was half torn down, covered in snow. It was empty, and all the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind." Investigators would go on to note that the tent was cut from the inside. They would find 9 sets of footprints left by people only wearing socks or even a single shoe, while others were barefoot. These tracks led to the nearby woods on the opposite side of the pass. This was just shy of a mile to the northeast. At the edge of the forest they would find a Siberian pine tree, under which were the visible remains of a small fire. There were also 2 of the first bodies they would find, those of Krovchenko and Dorovchenko. They were both shoeless and dressed only in their underwear. The branches on the tree were broken up to about 5 meters in height, suggesting that at least one of the skiers had attempted to climb up to look for something, perhaps their original campsite. Between the pine and the camp, the searchers would find 3 more corpses. They would be those of Dyatlov, Kolmogrova, and Sorbdin. The positions their bodies were found in seemed to portray the idea that they were attempting to make their way back to their tent. Unfortunately for the search crew, finding the remaining bodies would take significantly longer. It would take until May the 4th for their bodies to be found under 13 feet of snow, in a ravine 246 feet further into the woods from the pine tree. 3 of these individuals were better dressed than the others, and there were signs that some of the clothing of those who had died had been removed and used by these individuals. A medical examination would find no injuries that might have led to the deaths, and it was concluded that they all died of hypothermia. Slobdin had a small crack in his skull, however it was ruled not to be a fatal wound during that medical examination. An examination of the 4 bodies found in May shifted the narrative significantly. 3 of the hikers had fatal injuries, including major skull damage and major chest fractures. According to Boris Vorzovdeny, the force required for such injuries would have been extremely high, comparable to that of a car crash. Notably, the bodies had no external wounds that would be associated with such bone fractures. It was as if they had been subjected to extreme amounts of pressure. All 4 bodies found at the bottom of the creek were in a running stream. They had soft tissue damage to their heads and faces. For example, Dubina was missing her tongue and eyes, along with part of her lips, as well as having facial tissue and fragments of skull and bone scattered about, while Zoltyov had his eyeballs missing, and Alexander Krovekt was missing his eyebrows. The forensic examiner performing these post-mortem examination judged these injuries to have happened post-mortem due to the bodies being located in the stream. Initial speculation circulated about local indigenous reindeer herders having attacked and murdered the group. However, several of these indigenous people would be interrogated, yet the interrogation, along with the nature of the deaths, would show that this speculation was essentially baseless. One factor in the disapproval of this hypothesis was the fact that only the footprints of the hikers were found and there were no signs of any struggle. Something of note is that although the temperatures were very low, anywhere from -13 to -22 degrees Fahrenheit, and the fact that there was a storm blowing, is that these individuals were at most only partly dressed, and some only had a shoe, while others only wore socks, and for some reason some had ripped pieces and snips of cloth to clothe themselves further still. At said time, the official conclusion, and the most widely accepted conclusion, was that the group or members had died because of a compelling natural force. Official inquiries closed on May 1959 as a result of the complete lack of a guilty party. This caused the files to be put in a secret archive. In 1997, it was revealed that the negatives of one of the group's cameras had been kept in the private archives of one of the investigators, Levi Ivanov. The film material would then be donated by Ivanov's daughter to the Dyatlov Foundation. The diaries of the hiking party would fall into public domain in Russia in 2009. On April 12, 2018, Zolotrev's remains were exhumed on the request of journalists of the Russian tabloid newspaper Kosmoklaya Pravda. This led to contradictory results being obtained from those originally given. One of the experts said that the character of the injuries resembled the person knocked down by a car, and that the DNA analysis did not reveal any similarities to any of the living relatives of the individual buried at the site. However, the reconstruction of the face from the exhumed skull matched the post-war photographs of Zolotrev, although journalists expressed suspicions that somebody else might be hiding under Zolotrev's name after World War II, and that he had originally just died in World War II and been replaced. In February 2019, the Russian authorities would reopen investigations. However, only 3 possible explanations would be provided: an avalanche, a slab avalanche, or a hurricane. The possibility of a crime taking place would be discounted in its totality. It must be noted that 12-year-old Yuri, who later became the head of the Yekaterinburg-based Dyatlov Foundation and attended the funeral of the 5 hikers, recalled that their skin had a deep brown tan. And another group of hikers, who had been around 31 miles south of the incidents, reported that they saw strange orange spheres in the sky to the north during the night of the incident. Similar spheres were also observed in Ivdel and in adjacent areas, continually during the period of February to March 1959, by various independent witnesses, including meteorology services and military personnel. However, these sightings would not be noted in the 1959 investigation, even though various witnesses would come forth. Potential explanations for the incident include an avalanche, as stated on July 11, 2020, by Andrei Kryuskov, deputy head of the Urals Federal District Directorate of the Prosecutor General's Office, announced that an avalanche was the official cause of death in 1959. Later, independent computer simulations and analysis by Swiss researchers also suggested an avalanche would be the most likely case. There's a previously mentioned potential cause of death of hypothermia. There are claims as wild as Soviet superweapons to even a Yeti being involved in the deaths. Now, there is evidence that potentially contradicts the avalanche theory, starting with the location of the incident having no obvious signs of an avalanche ever taking place. An avalanche would have left large amounts of patterns of debris distributed over a wide area. However, this was not found anywhere near the bodies. There's also the fact that over 100 expeditions to the region had been carried out since the incident, and none of them ever reported conditions that could contribute to the creation of an avalanche. And a study using up-to-date terrain and relative physics revealed that the dangerous conditions found in another nearby area, which had significantly steeper slopes, were observed in April and May, when the snowfalls had been melting during winter. During February, when the incident occurred, there were no such conditions anywhere near the area. Another claimed potential cause of the incident that has been claimed by individuals would be a catabolic wind. A catabolic wind is a technical name for a drainage wind, which carries high-density air from higher elevations towards a downward slope, thanks to the force of gravity. These winds can sometimes be called fall winds, which can move at hurricane speeds. However, they are not as intense. Some individuals theorize that an accidental fire could have caused the inciting incident, necessitating the hikers to leave their clothing behind. And going back to the Yeti theory, in 2014 the Discovery Channel ran a documentary called The Russian Yeti, The Killer Lives, claiming that a picture could have been evidence of a Yeti being the one that killed the group. However, the validity of this documentary has been called into question. But one of the most popular theories that is able to explain the majority of what happened is the military cover-up, which is pointed to by the small amounts of radiation which were detected on the bodies, which have led to even wilder theories, including some sort of secret radioactive beam weapon. While many questions remained unanswered, the 2019 reopening of the investigation by the Russian government does give hope for this mystery to eventually have a conclusion. If you have remained with me until the end, I thank you, and I do hope you stay tuned and subscribe for more content.